A place meant to honor the dead became the center of a Washington firestorm. FBI Director Kash Patel took a private VIP snorkel tour around the sunken USS Arizona, a military grave holding over 900 sailors and Marines, and never disclosed it publicly. Veterans who guard that wreck out of duty call the move disrespectful, even comparing it to partying on top of a cemetery. Now lawmakers are using it as ammunition in a much bigger fight over accountability in Washington. Here's what really happened at Pearl Harbor and why it's become impossible to ignore.
And with that, I'd like to recognize the ranking member of the subcommittee, Mr. Johnson, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, witnesses, for your appearance today. Last summer, Kash Patel took a taxpayer-funded snorkel tour of Pearl Harbor, one of our nation's most hallowed grounds, while the cost of living for Americans skyrocketed. The Trump administration just created a taxpayer-funded $1.8 billion relief fund for January 6th insurrectionists and others in exchange for dropping a $10 billion lawsuit, a personal lawsuit that he filed against the IRS, which he controls. And he's doing this while millions of Americans are losing their health insurance. President Trump is blocking clean energy projects for his fossil fuel campaign donors, while the rest of us pay and pay and pay at the pump more and more every day. What do these facts have to do with this hearing? On its face, the daily demonstrations of incompetence and corruption of the Trump administration have little to do with the Supreme Court. But if you look closer, these stories mirror the far right and how far the far right has created a corrupt United States Supreme Court that too often works for the corporations, the billionaires and the oligarchs at the expense of the American people. For decades, MAGA Republicans have systematically chipped away at the impartiality of our third branch. They have already delegitimized our judiciary, yet they now stand before the American people pretending to be guardians of judicial integrity. Today's blatant attempt to rewrite history would be laughable if the consequences were not so dangerous for our democracy. But history matters. The American people deserve to understand how we got to this moment. And to understand how we got here, we must follow both the money and the machinery behind the modern conservative legal movement.
Some congressional exchanges attract attention because of the policy issues involved. Others become significant because they raise questions about judgment, symbolism, and public perception. This hearing falls into the second category, as lawmakers examined reports surrounding FBI Director Kash Patel and a snorkeling trip near Pearl Harbor, prompting Representative Mike Johnson to describe the location as one of our nation's most hallowed grounds.
This Powell memo set off a decades-long crusade by Republicans to concentrate power in the hands of the few at the expense of the many. Wealthy donors and corporate interests spent billions of dollars to reshape the judiciary in their image. Nowhere is the success of this decades-long effort more visible than at the United States Supreme Court, where a carefully appointed conservative supermajority, a MAGA supermajority, now delivers the MAGA conservative outcomes this movement spent billions of dollars to achieve, and achieve they did. In the last several years, the Roberts Court opened the floodgates to unlimited dark money in our political system, empowering billionaires and oligarchs like Elon Musk, the Koch brothers, Leonard Leo, Harlan Crow, and other powerful special interests to reshape the court and drown out the voices of ordinary Americans. This court has decimated reproductive freedoms that generations of women fought to secure, stripping away rights that millions of Americans relied on for nearly half a century. It has granted Trump vast immunity, placing him virtually above the law. And now, the court has put the nail in the coffin of the Voting Rights Act, dismantling protections that generations of Americans fought, marched, and died for.
The discussion quickly expanded beyond the trip itself. Pearl Harbor occupies a unique place in American history, representing the events of December 7, 1941, and the sacrifices that followed. Because of that history, activities taking place in or around the memorial area often receive heightened public scrutiny, even when they comply with applicable rules or regulations.
Abraham Lincoln once said, "This government cannot endure half slave and half free." Yet, that seems to be the vision for America that Chief Justice Roberts and the conservative supermajority on the Supreme Court envision, where some enjoy easy access to the ballot, others are forced to overcome legal barriers designed to make our voices quieter. Our nation is now in Jim Crow 2.0. We are a nation where the right to vote once again can be diluted, restricted, or simply ignored, and where the voices of rich and powerful people carry more weight than the voices of ordinary Americans, but particularly Americans who look like me. Our 250-year experiment in self-governance can only succeed if Americans decide that the clock has run out on the far right's attempt to overturn our democracy. So we can either sit back as our Supreme Court continues to act without any restraint or checks and balances, or we can do something about it. The American people deserve accountability for the damage that has been done. The American people deserve a judiciary that serves our democracy, not a narrow ideological agenda that only benefits the rich and powerful. So I want to thank the witnesses again for being here. I'm looking forward to a discussion about how to ensure that our democracy serves everyone, all of us, not just the wealthy and the well-connected few. And with that, I yield.
The controversy at the center of this video traces back to reporting from the Associated Press, which uncovered government emails showing that FBI Director Kash Patel took what officials described as a VIP snorkel excursion around the sunken USS Arizona during an official visit to Hawaii. The Arizona, resting at the bottom of Pearl Harbor since Japan's attack in 1941, is not simply a shipwreck or tourist attraction, it is the final resting place of more than 900 sailors and Marines, a designation that places it in the same legal category as Arlington National Cemetery. According to the reporting, snorkeling and diving around the wreck are almost never permitted, reserved for a small handful of dignitaries like Navy admirals or cabinet-level officials who need direct access to understand the site or monitor. Patel's swim, arranged through the Navy during a broader trip that included stops in Australia, New Zealand, and the FBI's Honolulu field office, was notably absent from the Bureau's own public accounting of his travel, a detail that only came to light once outside reporters started asking questions. What turned this from a footnote into a genuine controversy is the reaction from the people who actually understand what that water represents. A Marine veteran who dives the wreck annually to check on its physical condition didn't mince words, comparing the outing to holding a bachelor party inside a church. Technically possible to arrange, but a profound misjudgment of what the space is for. A Naval Academy historian went further, likening it to playing games on top of graves at Arlington, These aren't activists looking for a headline. They're people whose entire relationship to that site is built on reverence and stewardship, and their discomfort carries a different kind of weight than a partisan talking point would. It's worth noting the FBI pushed back hard, with a spokesperson framing the trip as a routine invitation from the Indo-Pacific Command during official engagements, not a personal excursion, and pointing out that some family members of Pearl Harbor survivors said they weren't bothered by it at all. Some even said they wished they could snorkel there too. That tension between "this was cleared through proper channels" and "the optics are genuinely bad" is really the crux of the story, and it's what Democratic lawmakers like Representative Hank Johnson seized on when he invoked the trip during an unrelated congressional hearing, framing it as one example in a pattern of what he characterized as government officials treating perks and privilege as normal while ordinary Americans deal with rising costs. That's a political argument, and reasonable people can disagree about how fair it is to lump a Navy-arranged tour in with broader critiques of an administration. But strip away the partisan framing for a moment, and there's a more basic accountability question underneath. Shouldn't a trip like this have been disclosed proactively, rather than surfacing only because journalists dug up the emails? The instinct to leave it out of the official travel summary is, on its own, a signal that someone anticipated how it would look. The broader context here matters too, because this isn't happening in isolation. This story landed while Patel was already facing scrutiny over other allegations, including a widely discussed report raising questions about erratic behavior and unexplained absences during his tenure running the bureau, along with an earlier controversy involving him socializing with Olympic hockey players after their gold medal win. None of those threads prove wrongdoing on their own, and it's important not to conflate a snorkeling trip with separate, more serious allegations that deserve their own scrutiny. But taken together, they build a pattern that makes even a defensible, officially sanctioned outing look like part of a larger story about judgment and self-awareness at the top of a law enforcement agency that depends heavily on public trust. At the end of the day, the legality of this trip probably isn't in serious question. It appears to have gone through official channels, and the Navy has confirmed it happened without disputing the basic facts. The real issue is one of judgment and symbolism. Public officials, especially those leading agencies built on public trust, don't just have to follow the rules. They have to think about how their choices read to the people who take those rules seriously, whether that's a veteran who dives that wreck out of duty in grief or a family member who lost someone there decades ago. Being technically permitted to do something is not the same as it being wise to do it, and that gap between what's allowed and what's appropriate is exactly where public confidence tends to erode fastest. If there's a lesson in this story beyond the specifics of one trip, it's that leaders in sensitive positions should be asking not just "can I," but "should I," and disclosing it plainly either way.